Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is August 27th, and we're on page 68 in your magazines. And today we're going to talk about a lot of really interesting English idioms that are based on different nationalities. Our title is Lost in Meaning, National Idioms.
Now, probably what's most notable of these phrases is that they're all really old, and they don't really pertain or have a especially clear meaning to modern English speakers.
Well, some of them are still used, but a lot of them are not.
We use them for sure, but why do we use them? Because we grew up saying them. But do we really think these things about these people? As we read through this, kind of ask yourself this question. Do Americans or English speakers in general, the British, actually think this about these particular people?
Like the Dutch, for example.
Probably not anymore, but there is a historical reason why a lot of these phrases came through, and I think it's kind of fun to learn these, although in a lot of ways these are kind of, the phrase I'll use is passé. They're a little bit kind of out of touch with some sensibilities for people, but they are extremely common phrases in English that kind of any advanced speaker should know.
Yeah, even if you don't use it yourself, you should be aware of it and able to understand it. Some of them, as Chris was suggesting, are not that politically correct anymore.
I'm thinking of a Dutch feast, which means that you get drunk at your party before your guests even arrive.
I didn't know that one.
That is, yes, a Dutch feast.
I didn't know that.
So that's kind of rude to the Dutch, right? But I don't know. It is a funny phrase. I'll give it that.
And I've lived in the Netherlands. Never heard it. Okay, well, they would be the least likely to use it, I suppose. Our title again is Lost in Meaning, National Idioms. Okay, Lost in Meaning, for me, that calls up a reference to an old TV series called Lost in Space.
Interesting. And so, lost in something. I thought of the phrase lost in translation, which just means that some phrases don't translate very easily between languages. I mean, English and Chinese is full of them. And it made me think of the movie that I watched over and over again when I first came here, which was a film about two expats feeling kind of adrift in their new country until they found deeper meaning in their society. And I kind of went through some of that myself when I first came here. So that lost in phrase is something you might see here and there.
I enjoyed that movie.
Oh, I loved it. I watched it over and over when I first got here.
Yeah, okay, because it kind of applied to your life.
It very much did. It was like, wow, this is the perfect film for this moment for me.
So, if you haven't seen it, it's just called Lost in Translation.
That's right.
Worth watching. Okay, our first paragraph. Some English expressions include names of countries or places, but don't take them literally. These idioms often reflect history, culture, and even old conflicts between countries. People online have talked about moments when they came across such expressions. So, as Chris said, they've been in English for a long time, and they are common enough that you should learn them, but some of them are just not used that much anymore. So when some people run into them, especially if English is not your first language, you may be kind of surprised and you may give it a wrong interpretation. So here are a few examples of people's reactions to running into some of these expressions.
Letter A, Kevin. It was my first date in the U.S. When the waiter brought us the bill, I hesitated, unsure of what to do. She smiled and said, "Let's go Dutch." Fortunately, I was already acquainted with the phrase. It meant we'd each pay for our own food. This idiom goes back to the 17th century when England and the Netherlands were rivals. The English used Dutch to poke fun at what they saw as the Dutch people's stinginess or extreme practicality.
B. Ruby. Before giving a speech at my friend's wedding, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. Then someone handed me a glass of wine. After a few sips, I felt confident enough to address the crowd. That's classic Dutch courage, my friend joked. I later found out that the phrase refers to the confidence people gain from drinking alcohol, especially in moments when they need to boost their courage.
C. Marcus. Once I accidentally used an offensive word in front of my professor. Embarrassed, I quickly added, "Pardon my French." He smiled and replied, "As long as it's not real French." I had often heard the phrase used as a funny apology after swearing. It originated in 19th century England. Educated speakers sometimes mix French into their English conversations. When listeners didn't understand, the speakers would politely say, "Pardon my French." Over time, the phrase evolved into a humorous excuse for using bad language.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning. We gave you a little introduction at the beginning, but let's talk about some of the expressions in it. So, don't take them literally. To not take something literally means that this is only a metaphor. I'm just comparing one thing to another thing. Don't think I'm just using it directly or literally. That means according to what each word means.
I like to say that the opposite of literal is to exaggerate. So this is without exaggeration.
Right. For example, just turn a blind eye to it. It doesn't mean that one of your eyes becomes blind. It just means that pretend you didn't see it. So don't take it literally. These idioms, an idiom is just an expression, and it's usually set in form, so you can't change the words in it in any old way. They follow a specific pattern. For example, to turn a blind eye to something should not be expressed as to turn blind eyes to something. We just don't use the plural there, we use the singular. So it's really set in its form. So they reflect, that means when you hear these expressions, they may sound odd now, but in fact, they hark back to, which is an even harder word, they are referring to something that happened a long time ago, but that has remained in the language and in the culture. Sometimes they're talking about an old conflict. Two people were rivals, or maybe they even had a war, and it's reflected in certain expressions sometimes. And people online, when they run into them, they think, gosh, this is an odd expression. Where did that come from, and what does it mean? So here we are with the first one by Kevin.
It was my first date in the U.S. So first of all, your date is probably you're going out on a date with someone. So I was on my first date, presumably with someone you just met. When the waiter brought us the bill, I hesitated, unsure of what to do.
So he's the guy here. In the past, you probably wouldn't hesitate as much. You just pay it as the guy. That was in a more male-dominated period of time.
For certainly, when I met my wife, I did not think twice. Even though I didn't have much money when I first arrived here, I did not think twice about paying. It absolutely, to me, was the expectation.
You did not want her to think you were really cheap.
Yes, very much so. So I hesitated. I waited. I didn't move very quickly. She smiled and said, "Let's go Dutch." And my heart broke.
Okay, now there's some cultural background here. Let's go Dutch sounds like a good thing, especially if, like Chris a long time ago, didn't have very much money to spend. You'd think, oh, what a relief. But no, he thought something else.
That's right. So when you go Dutch with friends, okay, sure, we're just paying for our own food. But if I'm taking you on a date, I am trying to pay for your food. If you say, let's go Dutch, this means let's just be friends. And that's not what you want to hear on a date.
And in fact, there's a kind of fun idiom in English that expresses that.
It's called friend-zoned, or to be put in the friend zone. So it's one word, friend plus Z-O-N-E, and this means you are not boyfriend material, you are friend-zoned. And I know a lot about the friend zone.
Okay, so if you don't want to be put in the friend zone, you want to appear generous and pay, not go Dutch.
Be bold. That's my suggestion. Because you want to find out if you're in the friend zone right away or not before you spend too much money and time. So that's right. All right. Fortunately, I was already acquainted with the phrase. It meant we'd each pay for our own food.
All right, now there's a little issue here because we made a little change. Originally, they said we would split the bill evenly. Now, that is a common way to pay for food when you go to a restaurant with friends. I do that now almost once a month. We have some friends, and they say, oh, let's each pay for our own. It gets really complicated. It's much easier if you just divide it up evenly, not counting the drinks, which are more expensive, and then you got a beer and I don't drink. So right. We divide it up evenly, and that's the way we say it. Let's just divide the bill up evenly.
Do your friends ever abuse the situation and order an excessive amount of food or something much more expensive than others? Or is it so close that who cares if you split evenly? It will be about the same.
So usually it's the second situation, but in the past, one of my friends is a very, very tall, very large man, and he had a correspondingly large appetite. He ate a lot more than me. I'm
Right.
small, I'm female. So there was a big difference. Back then, it would have mattered.
I wonder, I'm still a fan of going Dutch when, other than when I'm treating family, like I'm happy to pay for it. But if I'm going out with friends, we go Dutch. And I should also mention that go Dutch is sometimes also expressed as lowercase d. So don't get too nervous if you see it with the lowercase d. It is used exclusively with the capital D here. All right, let's move on to our next sentence. This idiom goes back to the 17th century when England and the Netherlands were rivals.
So there was conflict between them. And when there's conflict, you're going to often insult the other side.
So as soon as I tell you what they were fighting over and the reason why the British and the Netherlands were not getting along, you're going to say, oh, of course, New Amsterdam, which is Old New York. So they were fighting over kind of territory in North America. And the British were really mad at the Dutch, who were really quite good at what they were doing at the time. And they really wanted this territory called New Amsterdam, which, of course, we call New York City, specifically Manhattan. They really wanted that, and they were mad. So these Dutch, we don't like them. They're cheap and practical and stingy and all these other words that we'll talk about very soon.
And now I think property values in Manhattan are among the highest in the entire nation.
Maybe the British were onto something.
I guess so.
So the English used Dutch to poke fun at what they saw as the Dutch people's stinginess or extreme practicality.
And there is some basis in truth because they actually tend to divide things up very clearly. What are you responsible for? What am I responsible for? It's just part of their culture. It's true of Germany, too, which surprised me. It's so different from Chinese culture in which you want to appear generous and you treat people, you expect to be treated back in the future, but you don't count on it. So you want to appear generous. It's just not really part of their culture.
This is a great point because I'm a very practical person. That means you're effective and realistic. I try to avoid being too showy with money or whatever. I try to just be very everyday, salt of the earth, regular person, which just means just not too fancy. So I kind of like a lot of these Dutch expressions. They're used as kind of insults in the past, but I agree with almost all of them.
That's right. And people who spend time in the Netherlands, at first they're often kind of shocked and put off by the directness of the Dutch. And after a while, they feel they're more comfortable there because people tell you the truth.
That's right. The masks are off.
On the other hand, in Taiwan, I used to rush to pay often, but actually you are just putting other people in your debt. So they will have to do the same thing in the future. And sometimes it's hard to even things out. So I did that with a former supervisor of mine when I worked for the Taiwan government. And then she said, no, we're each paying for our own. I don't want to have any of those debts. And so here she is, a mature, very kind Taiwanese who said, I don't want to play that game. And ever since then, I said, I'm just doing it according to her example.
I think so. It's sometimes you need a person to lead with an example very bravely and just go down that path. I think generally speaking, if you explain to people how you feel, I think they're more okay with it. If you do it in the moment, maybe it can be more challenging. Maybe this is something you talk about before dinner. It helps make things a little bit easier.
That's right, but the brain does not like open loops. So if she had accepted, she would have to keep an open loop in her brain that in the future, I have to pay for the meal when I'm out with Karen. And that just gives you extra stress, and it's not worth it. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. Letter B by Ruby. Before giving a speech at my friend's wedding, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. Now, some people say one of the things that we fear most in life is public speaking. I've never understood that because I teach. I speak publicly all the time. On the other hand, when I gave a TED Talk, I was terrified.
Really? That's interesting. I never asked how you felt before that. So did you engage in any Dutch courage before?
No, I don't, because I don't drink. No. I just don't drink. And then I would be less sharp because when you drink, your reactions are slower and you get sleepy. And I didn't want either of those to happen. So I just was shocked at how stressed I was because I knew it would be online forever and the whole world could theoretically be watching. That changed everything for me. Just talking to a group of 35 students, I was used to that. But the whole world, man, that's a whole different thing.
How long did it take you during your TED Talk to feel in your element, to feel very comfortable? Because I have to say, you did not appear especially nervous.
Well, you could ask our former recording engineer because she went to the actual TED Talk.
Really?
And she says, oh, Karen 老师, excuse me, you did well. But, at the beginning, you were speaking kind of slow. You looked really nervous. But then after you got your first laugh from the audience, you seemed to relax. So that was, I think, unbiased opinion from a viewer.
I think so. And if you haven't watched Karen's TED Talk, you should, because there have been multiple times I'm just riding the MRT or people I'm close with, and I'll see them watching her TED Talk. And I actually work very closely with a person for a long time. She asked me some questions and I said, you watched Karen's TED Talk? And she's like, how did you know? And I'm like, because I work with Karen. I was like, of course I know this.
And in the end, we met for lunch.
That's right. What a wonderful situation. So you were very nervous, and then you were overwhelmed with anxiety. And then at the speech, not at the TED Talk, but at the speech, what happens next in our story?
Okay. To be overwhelmed with means that something is so powerful that it's hard for you to get over it and to act normally. Anxiety is the noun for anxious. All right, the next sentence, then someone handed me a glass of wine. Now, as I just explained to Chris, this would not fly in my situation. I simply do not drink. It's not that I don't do it for moral reasons. I just don't like what it does to my brain, period. That's it. On the other hand, I also saw a lot of bad things happen to people getting drunk when I was young. They were showing off about getting drunk, and they got into some really awful situations. So I just don't like drinking. All right. But in this case, someone handed me a glass of wine. They thought, this should calm your nerves. And it's true that alcohol reduces your inhibitions. That means your personal safeguards holding you back from being a little more outgoing.
Yeah, and it's important if you're going to engage in classic Dutch courage, as we'll see here. You don't drink too much because I don't know how many terrible wedding speeches are online where the person is clearly drunk and is just making a complete fool of themselves.
And testing everybody's patience, because often they go on and on. After a few sips, I felt confident enough to address the crowd. Like I said, this would not be my personal experience. And it's not that I've never tried alcohol. I did when I was young. I worked in a lot of pubs and restaurants. So I've tried it. Don't like it. All right. So I took a few sips. Like Chris said, don't drink too much or you will have trouble. But it made me feel a little less inhibited and shy. And it was just enough so that I was able to go and talk to the people. That's classic Dutch courage, my friend joked. So this is what we call Dutch courage. That means having a little alcohol to make you feel a little less shy. Now, this is one of the expressions that I have not heard for decades. This is really kind of outdated, in my opinion.
I agree. Generally, growing up, we called it liquid courage. Yeah. I have heard of the phrase Dutch courage, but we usually called it liquid courage.
And keep in mind that we are now very careful about political correctness, especially when it involves ethnic groups, names of other countries and things. People will call you out and they'll have a rant, R-A-N-T. That means they get really angry on the internet and they will criticize you. We don't need that in our lives. So in this case, this is the original expression. It's good to understand it, but you don't have to use it yourself. I later found out that the phrase refers to the confidence people gain from drinking alcohol, especially in moments when they need to boost their courage. I think you should understand this sentence easily. Boost means to strengthen or increase.
So, very briefly before our final paragraph, if you're wondering why there are so many phrases about the Dutch, including ones that are dead that we don't use anymore.
Right.
We have Dutch uncle, which means you have stern or harsh criticisms. Your Dutch feast, which I mentioned at the top of the show. You get drunk before your guests even arrive at your party. Why? Because a lot of these conflicts were taking place in the 1600s when English was undergoing a modernization. There are still many Shakespearean phrases from this time that we use all the time in English, and it just was the right fight at the right time, and it gave the English a lot of things to talk about. And so now today we inherit all these phrases about the Dutch that, I don't know, how many Americans have ever been to the Netherlands?
I have, but there's some that I haven't heard for a long time or haven't, like the one about the Dutch feast. I hadn't known that one before.
Dutch feast is a funny one. I'm not going to lie. That one should come back.
All right,
let's get to our paragraph here. Marcus says, Once I accidentally used an offensive word in front of my professor.
Okay, we don't have to specify what that word probably was, but if there's any kind of swearing or cursing, you really normally wouldn't want to do that in front of an elder, in front of anybody who has power over your grades, for example.
I did this in Chinese once. I was talking with a group of people and I used a swear word in Chinese. I didn't know it was a swear word.
See, that's the problem. As foreigners, we don't always know.
And this is a reason why I don't get too angry when my students use naughty language in my class, because I understand from my own context the shock of the people's reaction. And then I realized, I thought this was just an expression like, oh my goodness, when in fact I said something much worse. And I don't know how much my students actually know how naughty some words are, so I always give them good grace that first time. That first shot, hey, listen, that's a bad word, don't use it again. If they do it again, then I know they're testing me. But that first time, I never come down too hard on a kid.
What was the reaction when you used that expression?
Their jaws hit the floor.
And then what happened then?
And I stopped and I said, what did I say? And then they told me and I said, I thought it meant this. I didn't understand it was a swear word. In Chinese, there's not really a phrase, pardon my French, but if there were, that's what I would say.
Oh, okay. But you didn't know it at the time.
I did not know. So embarrassed, I quickly added, pardon my French.
Now, this is one we still use.
Yes. And he smiled and replied, as long as it's not real French.
Well, I'm not sure what they mean. It's just making a joke.
I had often heard the phrase used as a funny apology after swearing.
So that's an example of how you can learn the meaning of some expressions just by hearing them used in context. So somebody let a curse word slip and they suddenly say, pardon my French. You can say, I realize that I used a bad word, but please let it go.
So far we've said offensive word, swear, you said curse, and bad word. There's also cuss.
Cuss comes from curse, by the way.
And profanity. There are lots of ways to talk about those 4-letter words that we have so much in English.
Profanity is a very refined way to refer to these words, so please don't use any profanity.
Swearing is probably, I would say, the most colloquial and common way to say this. Let's continue. It originated in 19th century England.
Pretty straightforward.
Educated speakers sometimes mix French into their English conversations.
And this was really true because French was the language of culture.
When listeners didn't understand, the speakers would politely say, pardon my French.
Don't think I'm showing off. I'm just so used to speaking French. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable.
Oh, brother, you 1700 British people, you did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Over time, the phrase evolved into a humorous excuse for using bad language.
And this is something you can use. If you say something either on purpose or not on purpose, and somebody looks kind of shocked, just say, pardon my French.
That's right. As, for example, in the famous movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, pardon my French, but you're a blank hole.
Oh, dear. We've got some more fun stories for you, but you have to tune in tomorrow to hear them. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.